That's a very interesting question. This man is asking it very respectfully. He just wants to know the answer. Do the Jewish people think that people that aren't Jewish are considered like that of cattle, not even human? And this is a very strong statement, right? Like, what exactly does this mean? Where did this even come from? Now, if you've seen something like this, it's probably because you were on Twitter or Reddit, you went down a rabbit hole, and you eventually got confronted by many quotes from the Talmud, which is a book that Jews learn. Now, first I'm going to explain what the Talmud is, then I'm going to explain how it takes stuff out of context, and then I'll specifically answer this question because it's just the one that was asked. People like to think that the Talmud is laws of Judaism. This is what Jews rule. That's not what the Talmud is. The Talmud is a book of arguments that a bunch of random rabbis had with each other to get to a final law, right? Usually we're just kind of told laws. No one actually teaches us how we got to a law. They're just kind of there. This book is literally all the dialogue and conversations to get to a final law. That being said, half the time that the laws that they get to, that they like finalize once they have the whole entire argument, aren't even actual laws, and quotes that you see in the Talmud should not be taken as law. They're usually out of context, and they're usually just random opinions that are thrown out that are instantly rejected a second later. If you want actual laws, you could look at the Shulchan Aruch and things like that. Those are actual books of laws that Jews follow. The Talmud is specifically something that is this open dialogue to get to how we ended up getting to a law. But never is it actually, laws. That being said, because there's so many random opinions in there, suspicious things could be said sometimes. And many of these suspicious things can sound pretty sus. That being said, majority of these suspicious things aren't actually that suspicious and are usually completely misquoted or sometimes not even existent. Many times you could be on Twitter and you'll just see like a screenshot that shows a bunch of quotes of the Talmud that like people that aren't Jewish aren't human, or like you're allowed to steal from them. It'll give many of those types of quotes, all of them out of context. And before I specifically answer the question that was asked for this video, I encourage you to go to talmud.faithweb.com and it will answer every single question that has been asked on the Talmud, and like all of these things. Oh, it says this, all of them explained in context of what it's actually talking about, and there's a positive outcome to all of them. Your question will be answered. Not to mention, you'll actually find most of the time that the quote that you saw doesn't actually exist. It doesn't exist. But let me explain this one real quick. One of these phrases that you'll see is, Jews believe that non-Jews are cattle, and like not even human. Now, the first thing that you'll find is it doesn't say that quote anywhere. That quote doesn't exist. Here's the entire paragraph that it says, and this might be a little yappy, but I mean, listen, if you actually want to know what this answer is, you got to hear me out. Rabbi Yehuda said, it is forbidden to recite the Shema prayer, it's one of our prayers, in front of a naked Gentile. Gentile being someone that isn't Jewish. Why does he say a Gentile? It's also forbidden in front of a Jewish person, right? Why should it matter the religion that you say a prayer in front of? Saying a prayer in front of anyone that's naked is obviously against the law, And it says here, however, in front of a Gentile, one might say that since it says in Ezekiel 23:20, whose flesh is the flesh of donkeys, end quote, they're like donkeys, and you might think that since they're like donkeys, that's not the same level of nakedness as when you see a naked human. Therefore, you might think you could say the prayer in front of them. From the sound of that, it could sound like that we're saying that those people that if you're not Jewish, then you're like a donkey. That's what it could sound like. But you need to look at the context of what that quote in Ezekiel is saying. That verse is specifically describing the Egyptians back then that would persecute Jews, rape Jews, enslave Jews, beat Jews. They would do terrible, unforgivable things, as well as worship false gods and things like that. Because of all those things that group of people did back then, it described them as those that are like donkeys. You're barely even human at that point if you do these actions. But that's talking about that group that specifically persecuted us and did terrible things. That group doesn't even exist anymore. Egyptian people exist, obviously, but that specific group at that time period that did those things no longer exists, and that's what the group of people that verse was describing. But what I'm getting at is this quote you might see online when they quote the Talmud, which is non-Jews are like animals. It just doesn't. First off, it's not even said here. It's not even said there. It just says whose flesh is the flesh of donkeys. And that verse is specifically talking about that specific group of people that did terrible things to the Jewish people. Because they did such terrible things, they could barely even be considered human. And for your curiosity regarding all those that aren't Jewish, it's because it's specifically talking about those Egyptians back then. Rabbi Yehuda there continues on to teach, this is not the case at all. Gentiles are people and not animals, and Gentiles are unquestionably human, created in God's image. Literally says that right there, just in case you have anything else left to say. Point is, people love taking the Talmud, which isn't even a rule book, and then they like taking it out of context and just making up things that aren't even there. So, if you have any questions or you know anyone that likes bringing up these questions, I encourage you to go to talmud.faithweb.com. It will answer all your questions. Hopefully I taught you something.